Thank you very much, Marc. Good morning, everyone, to everyone here, and also good afternoon to those joining us from Asia. So I am Marc Julienne. I am the director of the Center for Asian Studies at Ifri, and it's my great pleasure to open our annual conference on Asia with this first outstanding panel. Before introducing our distinguished guest and also building up at what has been just said by Marc Ecker and Ambassador Pierre Vimont, I'd like to reflect on the theme of today's conference, strategic autonomies, and even more so, views from Asia. So as you know, and it has been said repeatedly already, strategic autonomy is a long-standing concept in France dating back from the 1950s and from President Charles de Gaulle. While it never completely disappeared, it was very much revitalized since President Macron's first term. And obviously, it has never been as relevant as it is today in the current disrupted global landscape we are facing. So in the French vision, to add on what has been said, strategic autonomy is not exactly the same as independence. Just as de-risking differs from decoupling, strategic autonomy recognizes that full independence is neither achievable nor desirable. It is about choosing your dependencies and not to seek total self-sufficiency. The United States remain our most important ally, but in Europe, we must also acknowledge that Washington may have other strategic priorities, or worse, it may have less and less interest in European security. The French perspective is clear. Strategic autonomy is not about distancing ourselves from the United States or from NATO, but about becoming stronger alongside the United States and within NATO. Yet, everybody would agree that the question has shifted dramatically recently with the new administration in Washington, D.C. And now the question is whether or not the US is still committed to multilateralism, to collective defense, and to European security. So at Ifri's Center for Asian Studies, we see European and Asian democracies facing shared challenges. On the one hand, an increasingly coercive China in trade, investment, diplomacy, and security. And on the other hand, our closest allies, the United States, questioning alliance, multilateralism, and the rules-based international order. From this observation and through continued discussion and dialogue with our Asian counterparts, it became clear that the concept of strategic autonomy is not only relevant to Europe, but also to Asia. And cooperation between Europe and like-minded Asian countries is not just desirable, it is now essential. And so to begin this discussion, and I will ask my fellow colleagues to join me on the stage, we must start with the beginning, and which is the question, what are Asian perspectives on strategic autonomy? Are we on the same page? What are the differences in our perspective and views? And so to have this discussion, I am honored to welcome 4 distinguished speakers from across Asia, from India, South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. So first of all, joining us remotely from India, we are very much honored to welcome Her Excellency Mrs. Nirupama Rao, a distinguished former diplomat from the Indian Ministry of External Affairs. Ambassador Rao served as Foreign Secretary of India from 2009 to 2011. And during her tenure as Foreign Secretary, she graced Ifri with her presence for a public conference, and we are delighted to welcome her back as an old friend of our institute. Ambassador Rao also served as Indian ambassador to the United States, to the People's Republic of China, as well as to Peru. From Seoul, I'm very happy to welcome Professor Hyun-Wook, President of Sejong Institute, one of Korea's leading think tank on international affairs and security. Professor Kim previously served as Director General of the Korea National Diplomatic Academy and holds advisory roles with several public agencies, including the Joint Chief of Staff. Hyun-Wook, thank you very much for making the trip to Paris, and we're very happy to have you. From Tokyo, I'm very happy to host Professor Chikako Kawakatsu Ueki, Professor of International Relations at Waseda's University Graduate School of Asia-Pacific Studies in Tokyo. Professor Ueki's work focuses on the causes and prevention of war, international security in East Asia, as well as threat perceptions in the Indo-Pacific, as well as in Europe. She previously served as a senior research fellow at the National Institute for Defense Studies, the famous NIDS, under the Ministry of Japan Ministry of Defense. And last but not least, coming from Taipei, it's a great pleasure to welcome Professor Hsiao, Deputy Director of the Taiwan Center for Security Studies at the National Zhengzhi University, or NCCU, in Taipei. Professor Hsiao was the Executive Director of Taiwan's Track 2 Council for Security and Cooperation in the Asia-Pacific, the CSCAP, from 2020 to 2024. She has also held position at the Taiwan Foundation for Democracy, the National Security Council, and the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington, D.C. Her expertise includes public international law, maritime security, cross-strait relations, and thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, all of you, to join us today. I look forward to a rich and insightful discussion on how we can collectively navigate those challenges ahead, and let us begin. If you can join me on stage. Each of you will have 10 minutes for your introductory remarks, after which we will open the floor for questions to the room and online. So without further ado, I now turn to Ambassador Rao for your opening remarks. Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you so much, and my very good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to join you from Bengaluru, or Bangalore, as you may know of the city, and to connect with this audience at Ifri. Distance, of course, changes the medium, but not the value of thoughtful exchange. And I'm very glad to share some reflections on the subject of strategic autonomy with all of you today. The international environment today is more unsettled than at any point in the last 3 decades. Strategic competition, as many distinguished speakers before me mentioned, has intensified. It's sharper, more unpredictable, and no longer confined to military power or ideology. Trade, technology, supply chains, and data have become arenas of competition and sometimes coercion. Conflict in Europe and the Middle East, rising tensions in Asia, and a fragmented multilateral system have created a sense of flux. This is not a simple return to the Cold War. It is far more complex, less structured, and far harder to predict. In this environment, strategic autonomy has re-emerged as a central organizing idea, not as a slogan from the past, not as a call for isolation, but as a practical way for states to preserve agency and shape their own choices. Across Asia, autonomy reflects a determination to remain open to the world, but not exposed to its volatility, to work with many partners without becoming dependent on anyone, to engage without being constrained. And for Asian countries, I'll come to the issue of India a little later in my statement, the question is no longer whether to engage, but how to engage on balanced and stable terms. Autonomy today is not about keeping equal distance between great powers. It's about ensuring that cooperation does not narrow your options and that interdependence does not become a source of vulnerability. Therefore, it's active, it's steady, and intentional. And we can see this clearly across Asia. Japan has advanced a comprehensive approach to economic security and resilient supply chains, alongside its vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific. South Korea seeks balance between a strong alliance and diversified economic partnerships. ASEAN continues to preserve diplomatic space for itself and the region, resisting binary choices. Countries like Indonesia and Vietnam work with multiple partners to retain flexibility in a complex environment. Asia is not retreating from integration with the world. It is redefining the terms of integration so that openness rests on resilience and not on dependence. And this instinct is closely tied to a responsibility that middle powers, especially, are beginning to embrace: the responsibility to stabilize the regional environment. When strategic currents are turbulent, it's easy to be swept along. Stabilizing means choosing not to amplify tension, but keep channels of communication open and ensuring that rivalry does not slide into rupture. Middle powers may not command the largest militaries or economies, but they can help set the tone of regional behavior. They can make diplomacy a habit, not an exception. To stabilize, we must also widen our understanding of security. Deterrence matters, but stability today is also shaped by economic resilience, trusted technologies, climate security, and inclusive growth. The Indo-Pacific is rich in opportunity, but it is also exposed to shocks. A stable region is one where economies are integrated, supply chains are diversified, sea lanes remain open, and dialogue is constant. Stability is therefore not passive. It requires steady and thoughtful effort. Strategic autonomy is also strengthened by integration, not fragmentation. Integration broadens choices, expands partnerships, and creates shared interests that anchor peace. Asia's history is full of connection: ports, trade, scholarship, and cultural exchange that crossed borders long before modern states existed. That spirit of connectivity remains relevant. Today, integration includes not only trade agreements and infrastructure, but digital norms, transparent standards, student and talent mobility, and collaborative innovation. For India, integration begins with building capacity at home. So engagement with the world rests on strength, not vulnerability. Our idea of self-reliance, which we call Atmanirbharta in India, is sometimes misunderstood as withdrawal. In practice, it means being a confident and able contributor to the world and a reliable partner because your foundations are strong. Integration for India means trusted technology partnerships, diversified supply chains, resilient critical infrastructure, and cooperation that strengthens sovereignty rather than diluting it. Integration is also about sharing opportunity. Much of India's development partnership with the Global South, whether in digital public infrastructure, health, education, or climate adaptation, is designed to expand access, not influence. It is integration through capacity building, not conditionality. It reflects the belief that connectivity must benefit many, not a few. And there's a third task that supports autonomy: to serve as a bridge for communication in the quiet, steady sense of the word. Such bridge building is not about inserting oneself into dramatic diplomatic moments or offering unsolicited solutions. It is about keeping dialogue alive when mistrust grows. It is about keeping balance. It's the patient work of maintaining channels, encouraging restraint, and listening with empathy. So such action requires credibility, an ability to understand more than one perspective, and the discipline not to make the moment about oneself. So to play that role, a country must be seen as steady, respectful, and principled. India occupies a very complex region where stability cannot be taken for granted. Our neighborhood demands engagement that is consistent and constructive. India does not seek dominance, and we seek a region shaped by rules, by consultation, by connectivity, and by choice. And this requires balance, as I said earlier, firmness where necessary, openness where possible, and dignity always. So strategic autonomy for India is neither a rhetorical slogan nor a revival of old non-alignment. It is a disciplined and interest-driven approach shaped by India's situation in global politics, a situation that demands that countries like ours engage on our own terms. So in the same context, multi-alignment with a number of powers and with the Global South has emerged not out of hesitation, but real-time strategic calculation. It expands our space for choice and the choice of action determined by our national interest. India is sometimes described as occupying a liminal space between the global north and the global south, between established power and emerging power. I see this not as ambiguity, but as a strength. Liminality allows India to understand different perspectives, speak to multiple audiences, and build bridges where others see only divides. So in a more polarized world, countries that can inhabit more than one mental map are not in between, they are connective and they hold the space for dialogue. There's a natural convergence between the Indian and European thinking on strategic autonomy. Europe understands the instinct to preserve decision-making space, to avoid over-reliance, and to maintain balanced engagement. In India, this instinct has deep roots in our philosophy and culture. Today, it's expressed with greater confidence and outward engagement. Both India and I believe Europe also look at the international system as needing to evolve, not ossify. And I think we both value a multipolar, rules-based order that reflects current realities more fairly. But if I may offer a friendly reflection, for Europe, strategic autonomy cannot remain a conversation within Europe. If it is to be influential, it must involve sustained and invested engagement with Asia, not only episodically, but also during crisis, not just during crisis, but as a long-term strategic habit. The Indo-Pacific will shape the future of trade, technology, climate action, and global governance. And Europe should not arrive only when the script is already written. It should shape that script alongside Asia. And I also believe that India and Europe can work together as partners in supply chains, critical minerals, digital standards, maritime security, and climate transitions, all about building resilience. And France has shown great clarity and leadership on this. There is space for Europe as a whole to deepen its presence, understanding, and investment in the region. And therefore, let me conclude with 5 propositions for what a responsible approach to strategic autonomy could look like in the coming years. First, autonomy should widen choices, not shrink them. If autonomy closes doors, it has failed. It should enable countries to cooperate with many partners without feeling encircled or constrained. Secondly, autonomy must carry a sense of responsibility towards the international system. It should not fuel zero-sum nationalism. It should encourage behavior that strengthens the global commons. And third, economic resilience and technological capability are now core to strategic strength. Investing in them is not protectionism, it's preparation for a more interdependent and contested world. Fourthly, autonomy should reinforce, not weaken, multilateralism. Asia and Europe can work together to update global institutions so they reflect today's distribution of power and concerns rather than those of another era. Fifthly, autonomy should make cooperation more dignified and more balanced. It should promote mutual respect, agency, and trust. Partnerships work best when they do not require countries to choose between identity and engagement. Finally, Asia's pursuit of autonomy will shape the international order in the decades ahead. The crucial question is not whether we seek autonomy, but what kind of autonomy we choose. If autonomy accelerates fragmentation, instability grows. If it creates space for balanced cooperation, it can renew the foundations of peace. India's experience shows that autonomy and engagement are not opposites. They strengthen each other, and I believe Europe understands this well. Together, I would say that India and Europe can help ensure that strategic autonomy becomes a force for fairness, balance, and shared purpose in a complex world. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ra. That was very comprehensive. You put the diagnosis, you have some, and you also propose some recommendations, so that is very, very helpful. I couldn't agree more when you said that Europe should not come with the script already written. And as Ambassador Vimont said, actually we have the concept, but the strategy or the roadmap, the very concrete roadmap is not completely clear to say the least yet. And so one of the objectives of this conference is to share ideas and to try to make sense and make this strategy or this concept more concrete. So thank you again very much for your concrete proposal. Now I turn over to Hyun-Wook for your 10 minutes introductory remarks. Thank you very much, Hyun-Wook.
Thank you. I'm very delighted to be here. Thank Ifri and thank Marc for inviting me. I think ever since President Trump came in as the president of the United States, I think more and more closer the Europe and Asia is becoming. I'm very happy that that's one of the gifts that Trump gave to me. About the strategic autonomy concept, I don't think the concept itself is not well pronounced in a public discourse in Korea or political discourse. It's the term that is widely used in academics and sometimes in the media. I have written a column, newspaper column in about 4 years ago using the term strategic autonomy, but that's not very rare. Maybe we can position the term more in a situational rather than a correct conceptual in Korea. Maybe the time that came out with the similar situational concept of a strategic autonomy in Korea happened in 2016 when South Korean government allowed the US forces in Korea to deploy THAAD into South Korean territory. Terminal high altitude area defense, which is a missile defense system, which was viewed by China as a South Korea becoming a part of the US missile defense systems at the time. And what Chinese government at the time argued was that that would damage the South Korean and Chinese sovereignty because the X-band radar equipped with the THAAD system has a capability to surveillance South Chinese territory more than 110 kilometers at the time. But that is not really a fact because it was 2014 that China actually at the time introduced the Russian S-400, which is the Russian THAAD system, which enabled China to look over all the territories of the Korean Peninsula. But anyway, whatever the government, whatever the arguments Chinese government did at the time, what happened right after that deployment in South Korean territory was a Chinese economic sanctions on South Korea, tourism sanctions and sanctions on the industries, working in China. One of the examples is that when the electric vehicles are exported into China with batteries made in South Korea, for example, LG and SK, they were not allowed a Chinese state subsidy at the time. So I think that was very important, a critical juncture that made South Korean people to have a very high degree of anti-China sentiment at the time, which I think is still lingering on. Still, there is a high, anti-China sentiment in South Korea. Of course, more and more anti-US sentiment is growing after Trump came in. So after the Yoon Suk-yeol government came in 2022, we began to change our China policies. It was very audacious, which was not conceivable before, because South Korea, I think it's the same to North Korea. I mean, the entire Korean Peninsula had some traumatic memory of its history with China historically. we will always subservient to China. We need to provide a tribute to China so that China would not invade us. So that kind of traumatic history was still lingering on. And I think as a result of the South Korean government had some limitations to be bold on China, on our foreign policies. But I think after Yoon Suk-yeol government came in, we abruptly changed our policies. At the national security strategy at the time, we put the relationship between China and South Korea based upon mutual respect and reciprocity. And the government put it exactly at the national security strategy that THAAD deployment is a matter of our security sovereignty. And things are changing. And current government came, Lee Jae-myung government came in this year. And President Lee Jae-myung mentioned in Washington, D.C., in his speech at CSIS that there's no more security with the U.S. and economy with China. We know that President Trump, I'm not sure, he's not exactly providing the same extended deterrent to allies like South Korea for free. Maybe he'll try to get something out of it. And he's trying to reduce the U.S. forces in Korea, in South Korea. He wants all these U.S. forces in South Korea to be dedicated to other areas like Taiwan Strait areas and China issues rather than dealing with North Korea threats. Okay, what do we do with the North Korea threats? Okay, South Korea military, you take care of it. So I think there is more and more issues rising from security areas in South Korea that, oh, maybe we need to take care of our own security. Some sort of strategic autonomy is booming up now, which I think is the things that we have gotten out of the APEC meeting this year, that we got the establishment and buildup of nuclear power submarine from the President Trump, which I think is one of the big achievements, which has been limited for many years because of NPT regime. And maybe if, South Korea has nuclear power submarine, they will devastate the security environment in the Indo-Pacific region. South Korea, those people are very warmongers. They will try to, instigate North Korea and China, and there will be possible conflict blooming up. That was some kind of concern the U.S. had, but this time President Trump allowed South Korea to develop it. About the economic relationship, it's changing now. When China was rising from 1990s and 2000s, what South Korea requested for China was two things. We want Chinese support for the North Korea denuclearization. And second one is that, okay, China is a big opportunity for South Korea's economic benefits. It provided a big market sharings and cheap labors. South Korea sold a lot of commodities in China. Hyundai Motors, they built factory in Beijing, and they still have Samsung memory semiconductor factory in Nanjing. Things like that. A lot of opportunity, but things are changing now. It doesn't give us any more the opportunities. From the year 2023, we are trade deficit country to China. China is now competitive to South Korea. They're building high-tech industries and semiconductors and batteries, BYD, EVs, which is, I think, moving ahead very quickly over South Korean high-tech industries. So I think things are very quickly changing. Still, some of the lingering relationship between China and South Korea is that there is a raw materials that we import from China to build batteries and semiconductors and pharmaceuticals, things like that, which is exported back to China so that they produce the final product, which is exported to other third countries. So I think that kinds of some points that we still depend upon China is still continuing. So we took some measures. I think I talked briefly. There are 5. in 2023, Ministry of Trade and Industry and Energy of South Korea pronounced a national strategy for critical minerals. We designated 10 strategically critical minerals and trying to build up a strategic autonomy in those critical minerals. We reduced the dependence on China from 80% to below 50% by 2030, trying to designate 30 strategic partner countries, deepen cooperation with the Mineral Security Partnership, things like that. That's something we have done. And the second one we did is that we, 2021, built a huge, humongous K semiconductor mega cluster in Gyeonggi province. This is to make South Korean semiconductor industry more self-sufficient vis-a-vis China. Another one is that we began to expand our strategic stockpiling of those important minerals and raw materials that we depend upon China. And also a lot of factories in China are now moving out of China and moving to Vietnam, India, Mexico, and other areas of Southeast Asia. And also in 2022, South Korean National Assembly passed laws mandating early warning systems for critical supply chains. So these are something that we are doing now. I don't know how much we can be strategically autonomous vis-a-vis China on economic issues and vis-a-vis US on security issues. A lot of experts, as I mentioned, Trump is giving me a lot of opportunity to visit Europe for a lot of conferences. And a lot of European experts are rather skeptical about US becoming back to normal after Trump is gone. We don't know about the future. It's very uncertain. But I think it's time that some other countries like Europe and Asia, supporting the liberal international order, even though US is gone, and support the order and maintain our interest to be network together, interwork together. And I think someone needs to raise hands. Someone needs to take burdens. If no one like a France, raise burden, hey, I'll take lead, you follow me. That kind of leadership is something we need. If there's no leadership like that, all the collective action would not be possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim Hyun-Wook. That was also very much comprehensive. You started with the securities, with the hard security dimension, but closely drifted toward economy, industry, and critical minerals. And this is where, again, we are all on the same boat these days vis-a-vis our dependency and reliance. So thank you very much for that, and also for the very concrete examples on how South Korea is now trying to deal with those challenges with putting some measures, and those measures can be replicated or can inspire also in Europe. We have some challenges when it comes to critical raw materials. We will discuss that later on today. And there is room for cooperation, especially with there is an ongoing cooperation between France and Japan in southern France, a co-investment. And this is a strange transition to Japan, and to give the floor to Chikako Ueki to give us your perspective on how strategic autonomy is perceived in Japan. Thank you very much.
Okay. Bonjour tout le monde, je suis très heureuse d'être ici à Ifri. Je voudrais remercier Ifri, surtout Marc et Jean. So my role is to explain what the Japanese elites and the government is doing in terms of strategic autonomy. And what I'd like to do today is probably start from some events. Some were intentional, others were more accidental, or just that came together to create the emergence of this concept of strategic autonomy, but also the need for that. And some of it would overlap with some of the things that is already being said. I will do that because it sort of gives us a clue of understanding the Japanese remedies for how to obtain strategic autonomy. And I think there are three different things. Before I begin, though, I'd like to point out that free trade for Japan is extremely important. It is an island country with limited resources, natural and other things. So it depends on trading with other countries in a free way. So this is something very important and dear for Japan. And at the end of the day, if we are left in a situation where we might have some of the goods and on our own, but if the free trade system has broken down and some of the rules are no longer in place, that is something that we need to avoid. I remember being here about maybe in 2019, there were some concerns about strategic, the trade and like a competitiveness in high-tech, high-end technologies. But nevertheless, I think we still, and certainly elites, security elites and the government and many people around the world believe that economic interdependence is a force for stability. And I think very few people in Japan thought that wars amongst major powers were unthinkable, right? They thought that, well, because of the two things, one is the nuclear deterrence and the other was economic interdependence. Now we're faced with a situation which is more tit for tat. But as I said, because sustaining this free trade institution and systems and just behavior is so critically important to Japan, but to the world, we must find a way to get out of the situation. So I think there were three different kinds of causes and that happened. I think one was economic, and the second was economic security, and the third is what we might be able to call military security. On the economy, I think the onset certainly was the COVID-19, and this was not intentionally done, but I think it made many people in Japan realize that things that were assumed to just come in stopped, because some of the factories were no longer producing and many of the borders were closed. So this was an onset. So this is, the objective would be to keeping business as usual. So strategic autonomy would mean that keeping it as usual, so the production and the people's lives would continue as it is. Okay, sorry, yeah. And in Japan, strategic autonomies is often coupled with another concept, which is strategic indispensability, which means that Japan is indispensable to the others with the different sectors. So these are two concepts, being autonomous, but also indispensable to others, so to be relevant. Okay. The second is the economic security dimension. And this is to be free and to be less vulnerable to economic coercion. I think the 2010 rare earth incident, after the incident around the Senkaku Island, was the first instance that to realize that this sort of a firewall between economy and politics have broken down, and China had actually chose to do this. However, I would argue that economic autonomy or strategic autonomy didn't quite, emerge right after 2010, although there were concerns of how to get supplies for rare earths, should those stop. And I think the realization that there was a hope that because of the economic interdependence, that there will be less uncooperative behavior between the two countries, and certainly from China, however, this optimism, I think, have really become much less amongst the Japanese people now. The third would be the military security. And this, I think, was a realization that the war on Ukraine had happened. And as I said, many people thought that wars amongst major powers was just unthinkable for the reasons I said, but it did happen. So a lot of people thought if it happened in Europe and in Russia, maybe it would happen in East Asia again also. So the concern was over China, over Taiwan, and so this, and also some of the testimony that was made in the US about the 2027 as a sort of a timeline to be concerned about. So this all three things came together and created this concept of strategic autonomy, but also the need for it. So based on these three different kinds of categories and the three different sets of things that happened, I think one would be the remedy would be first, as I said, to keep the business as usual. And the second would be to be less vulnerable to economic coercion and also on the military security side, also to maintain sustainability should war occur. Japan is known that it has many fewer ammunitions than probably needed if there was a war. So there was in the 2022 National Security Strategy, some of the things that were implemented was to increase the number of munitions, missiles, hardening of the runways, shelters, something that is rather obvious, but before the war was unthinkable. So some of those things were not in place. Okay, so what are the remedies to all these things? So as I said, strategic autonomy and strategic indispensability both aim to decrease Japan's vulnerabilities and dependence on other countries. But as I said, strategic indispensability means that it wants other countries to be more dependent on Japan. So this would be a source of sort of also, decreasing of the vulnerability, but also having some influence and also some relevance in business behavior, trade, but also in rule making. Japan has identified about three categories, and one is destructive technological innovation in destructive technologies, and two would be areas where Japan still has the relative advantage in technology, and third is where Japan is dependent on other countries. So Japan has different remedies and sort of policies to overcome these problems. And so for the destructive technological innovation, Japan sees the need to stay in the game. It does realize that it alone cannot compete with either United States and China in many ways, but by providing some of the resources necessary for the industry and the research institute, the hope is that there will be a push because it is a risk for many of the companies to invest in some of the future technology. So the idea is to collectively have some sort of institutions together and also provide some financial and different kinds of support for that. The second is where Japan has the advantage. And here the remedy is more about protection of the technology. So some of the things that the Japanese government has implemented in security clearance for those that use these technologies, changing of the patent system so that not everything is out in the open. And these would be in areas like semiconductor manufacturing machines, optical fiber, liquid lithium battery, and like CAT scans and MRI, those areas. So that would be trying to not let the technologies get out illegally or unlawfully. And dependence on others, this is more the autonomy part. So this would be reducing dependence, and on computing, there will be a cloud or mobile phones. Again, lithium, LFP. Many people mentioned about the important minerals and things like biotech, respiratory medicine, and things like masks, syringe, those things that are necessary, everyday ordinary use of medical. This is a lesson learned from the COVID case. So Japan has sought many partners, and that it has on like minerals, working together with Australia. Japan now has a destroyer built together with Australia. So, and with South Korea, we have a lot of the semiconductors. With Taiwan, TSMC is building a big factory. And so there are many things happening. And with Europe, there would be like a joint fighters, you know, the fighter building of the fighters, building missiles with the US. So a lot of things happening with other countries as well. One of the questions, though, that might come, so is Japan seeking strategic autonomy in hard security from the United States? Because that would be one thing that might come into mind, because Japan has always been rather worried about US abandonment, and that's quite the case, often the case where junior partners in alliances feel whether the patron state would actually provide defense security when it comes. So this has always been the case, but I think the trend is not just with the current President Trump, but I think it's probably started from President Obama, where when he declared that US is no longer the world's policeman. So this is an ongoing trend, but I think Japan has not chosen to be strategically autonomous to the US. I think what Japan is trying to do still is to make sure that US thinks that Japan is indispensable, that the alliance is always not just necessary for Japan, but also for the US. So consolidating the alliance, strengthening the alliance, and also to be on a trade side, to be on a good terms with the US, not to offend, rather, you know, not to talk about maybe reciprocal, you know, sort of a punishment, as it were, on tariffs. So Japan has always said that free trade is important, and Japan is not going to the road of reciprocally putting tariff on the US. So Japan has acquired strike capabilities in 2022 National Security Strategy, which is something that is very new and unprecedented. Never since the war, Japan had offensive missiles, long-range missiles. But again, this would give Japan some capabilities of its own, but it's very much tied in within the alliance. It relies on the US for targeting things. So it's still, it's not moving away from strategic autonomy in the sense of security with the US. So I would repeat, I think Japan wants to maintain free trade system, and it does see a risk, and it doesn't want to be over-dependent and be a victim of economic coercion, and it doesn't want other countries to be economically coerced either. However, I think many companies still do a lot of business with China. I think a lot of the countries in trade with China and their economy, they have a very strong relationship, economic relations with China, and Japan is a neighbor to China. So it cannot decouple itself. That's unthinkable. And one of the things that is a real challenge in the practical terms that Japanese government and the companies are finding out is finding out how dependent Japan is. The companies might be importing one thing, but it might, the subcontractors might be importing from another. So finding out the choke points is extremely difficult. So to be, you know, we want to be more self-reliant and less dependent is one thing, but actually knowing where the goods actually come from is, I think, in practical much more difficult. Some of the things that Japan is hoping to do, maybe with partners, try to identify where the choke points are, where actually things move. Some things are produced in maybe more than 50 countries. So finding out where the dependency is, but also not to disrupt the economic behavior, but also the free trade system. I will stop here and then thank you very much. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Chikako. I see many common ground and common interest between Europe and Japan in what, from your presentation, first of all, you mentioned the war in Ukraine, which is probably similar also from a South Korean or Taiwanese perspective, that security is interconnected, and what's happening in Europe may also have an influence or impact in East Asia, and likewise, what the security situation in East Asia has and would have consequences in Europe. You mentioned also the decoupling, and just to make clear again that it was never a thing in Europe as well. We never believed, we never bought this concept or this notion of decoupling, and that's why the European Commission come up with this concept of de-risking in 2023, which we may perhaps agree as well. And I was very, very interested in your concept of strategic indispensability, which is another way to see strategic autonomy. Yes, it's to decrease, to reduce your reliances, but also perhaps to increase yours. And in my introductory remark, I was saying that strategic autonomy is about not to be self-reliant, but to choose your dependencies. And also seeing on how, which field we can also build some dependencies is also something that we in Europe should get inspired. Without further ado, I will turn the floor to Professor Anne Hsiao from Taipei for your remarks. Thank you very much, Anne.
Thank you very much, Marc. And I also want to join my panelists to thank Ifri for inviting us to these very relevant and timely discussions. And I'm struck by the previous speeches about how much Taiwan is actually aligned with the rest, most of these countries here present, about our conceptions on strategic autonomy and our approach to go about it. So in the last few minutes, I will give you an overlook about how Taiwan conceptualize and implement its strategic autonomy. I think there is no need for me to stress the importance of Taiwan's strategic positions today in the world and in the Indo-Pacific. So I will skip that overall sort of review again, which has been much mentioned. But I will say a few words on the challenges that to Taiwan's strategic autonomy, which some of them are common to the other countries and regions, but also some unique to Taiwan. The main challenge to Taiwan's face is from the People's Republic of China, or PRC, to its national security and self-identity. However, that Taiwan also faces risks from geo-economic impacts of the post-COVID pandemic, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the US-China competition, and the US MAGA and tariffs policies. There are also non-traditional security threats such as climate change and so on, which has caused disruptions to supply chain, resource and energy shortages, and digital infrastructure resilience vulnerabilities. There's also the problems of uncertainties in the evolving relations with other international partners. It also faces more complicated, increasingly complicated internal factors in its domestic environment. So on that, I will turn to Taiwan's how Taiwan conceptualized and defined its security autonomy. In fact, after a closer look into what we have in stock, Taiwan doesn't really have a single doctrine on security, on strategic autonomy yet. In other words, we do not have a policy paper that address fully on these issues. But however, during the past several years, some strategic autonomy undertones began to emerge under former President Tsai Ing-wen from 2016 to 2024, which coincided with the developments in Europe. When she and her administration began to talk about Taiwan first economic security, information security is national security, and defending Taiwan's autonomy. President Lai, who was the vice president between 2020 and 2024, largely inherits such connotations and build on them. And he became the president from May 2024. So he has emphasizes both military and non-military strategies, which are aimed at bolstering Taiwan's self-reliance and resilience against the coercion from China on the one hand, but also remaining viable and competitive, and like Japan, indispensable in an increasingly uncertain and complex global community. Here I would like to drive your attention to his speech and one document. The first document that was published in Wall Street Journals in 2023, July 4th, op-ed, spoke about 4 plans for peace building in the Taiwan Strait. And the first pillar is building up deterrence against external threat. The second is economic security is national security. The third is building partnerships with democratic countries. And the fourth is to adopt the multilateral approaches to deal with these goals. Another speech that I'd like to draw to your attention is his speech at the Taiwan European National Security, in the 2025 National Security and Economic Resilience Forum in September 2025. He said that Taiwan faces challenges including the rapidly changing economic order, complex geopolitics, extreme weather, food insecurity, cybersecurity threat, and cognitive warfare. And he added that beyond the military, national security encompasses communications, finance, energy, and cybersecurity. So Taiwan has to bolster overall national resilience with an integrated approach in order to ensure national security and stable development. So how do Taiwan address these questions and strengthen its strategic autonomy? I will identify 3 components here. And in each component, I will give a few examples on how Taiwan goes about it. The first and foremost is defense and security. And President Lai has stressed the need to defend ROC Taiwan's sovereignty, uphold Taiwan's free and democratic way of life, and resolutely oppose annexation of Taiwan, as well as an imposed one country, 2 systems by China. To defend Taiwan from China's coercion, like Ambassador Vimong said, we have also adopted a peace through strength approach and to strengthen Taiwan's resilience. So in terms of defense, Lai Ching-te's government has embraced asymmetric warfare, and the 2025 quadrennial defense review the QDR outlined Taiwan's current military strategy, which is widely known as the porcupine strategy. So instead of trying to match China's military might, Taiwan will focus on developing agile, high-impact, and cost-effective capabilities. Taiwan has also pledged to increase its defense budget and investment. And here I stress both budget and investment. On his 10th October National Day address, President Lai announced the increase to 3% of GDP of the defense budget in 2026. And it will reach, by taking example from NATO, to 5% of GDP by 2030. Taiwan is also turning towards developing autonomous or automated defense system and prioritizing indigenous advanced high-tech and AI-driven military productions like drone, advanced missiles, submarine, and so on. Another highlight is the announcement of development of T-Dome. It's an air defense system to provide multi-layer defense, high-level detection, and effective interception for Taiwan. His government will also invest to bolster Taiwan's defense industry and industrial capabilities. To tackle the resilience, the government has, President Lai in particular, has set up under the presidential office a whole of society resilience committee. And this was announced in June 2024. It will build up strength by cooperation between government and private sector, between central and local government, and to better prepare Taiwan's population during time of a national emergency or stress. The government have also adopted integrated disaster prevention and defense measures to strengthen civil-military cooperation. So these are the highlights that I would like to draw your attention in terms of defense and security. On the matter of the second pillar is economic and technological resilience and development. So Taiwan has developed policies throughout the last 8 years to both promote economic security and technological autonomy and innovation capabilities. Taiwan's measure includes safeguarding its supply chains for critical industries, reducing trade dependencies, mitigating high-tech and tariff challenges to traditional manufacturing factors and micro, small, medium enterprises to ensure Taiwan's competitive advantage in the world. And here, some of the highlights include first, the introduction of 5 trusted industry sectors promotion plan for 2024 and 2028. And the 5 areas of industries are semiconductors, artificial intelligence, military, security and surveillance, and next generation communications, which include 6G technologies, B5G communication satellite, and ground equipment. Securing leadership in global semiconductor supply chain is also important. However, government is not restricted to semiconductors only. It will also develop other sectors through domestic funding. For example, the government has introduced 10 billion NT dollar fund for investing in AI and digital industries. It also seeks international cooperations on, for example, computing capacity and low energy AI with international partners. Taiwan is also trying to mitigate challenges to traditional industry and micro, small, medium-sized enterprises to weather the impacts from supply chains disruption and tariffs. So the focus is currently on agriculture and fishery sectors. There are plans to invest tens of billions of dollars each year to help these small, medium, micro enterprises to transition to be more adaptive to the AI age and net zero upgrades. Of course, it is very important also for Taiwan to continue to reduce its trade dependencies on China. Although Taiwan has already been successful in diversifying its trade relations away from China, China is still Taiwan's the main top export market, although it's greatly reduced from 40% to 22%, not including Hong Kong. So if we include Hong Kong, it still stands for a little bit over 30%. So this will be a continuing efforts for Taiwan to diversify itself. Critical mineral is another way that Taiwan will be dealing with, and I'll come back to that later in our discussion. Another thing that I'd like to mention is the three major strategies to ensure Taiwan's competitive advantages, which Lai has introduced on 10th October on his National Day address as well. These including, first, policies to expand investment in Taiwan. And the government will put more money to expand programs that aim to further improving Taiwan's investment environment and job creation. It will also add around 720 billion NT dollars to in new loans to attract more investment. And the program is applicable not only to local industry, but also overseas Taiwanese business worldwide and foreign investing enterprises. So like every other countries, Taiwan is not taking a protectionist approach. Secondly, Taiwan will launch $1 trillion NT dollar investment national development plan to promote innovative public-private partnerships for critical infrastructure projects nationwide to address the water, electricity, housing shortages, education, transport, healthcare, tourism, etc. So the second pillar of the major strategies is deepen international economic technology cooperation, mainly through bilateral and multilateral new trade agreement or expanding, building on existing trade agreements. And also, Taiwan will try to sign more economic and trade cooperation agreements with more new like-minded partners. Thirdly, the government is also building a chain of guardian mountains that, as many of you know, that Taiwan has called silicon shield or the semiconductor chips as its guardian mountains, but Taiwan is going to build more mountains to shore up its industrial capabilities. For example, it will implement 10 new AI infrastructure initiatives to become one of the top 5 computing centers in the world. Taiwan will also invest in R&D in 3 key technology fields, including quantum, silicon photonics, and robotics. And I think there will be cooperation possibilities between Asian countries, particularly Japan and maybe South Korea. Thirdly, Taiwan will be building itself into a hub of Asia for asset management to attract both Taiwanese and international capitals and and to create more jobs for the country. Taiwan will also introduce national infectious disease. Taiwan has also completed a national infectious disease bank. Sorry, it will be completing, and it will be completed in 2026. And with this infectious disease bank, Taiwan will be able to have cooperation with other countries in biotechnology and sort of biomedical area, and smart health and innovation and entrepreneurship. So you can see that the three major strategies show the recognition by the President Lai of the need to calibrate and balance Taiwan's over-concentration on semiconductor industries. So on critical technology, I think preserving and securing our supply chain on resources, including trade, including food security and critical minerals, are also on Taiwan's top priority, although Taiwan currently is not directly badly hit by the rare earth elements. Taiwan has actually, in addition, I think many countries talk about mining and developing, but also Taiwan industry have started think about recycling from existing materials that are available. So this is an area that I think there are potential cooperation possibilities between Taiwan and Europe and the rest of our Indo-Pacific partners. So I will turn to technology resilience.
Can you wrap up?
Yes. Okay. Sorry about that. So I'll be happy to talk about technological resilience, but I think I will point out the third and final pillars for Taiwan's sort of strategy to implement its strategic autonomy is international cooperation and partnership. And here, I think we can look into the possibility in defense industry, in digital communication, including the recently announced infrastructure sort of international undersea cable management initiatives that mitigate risk of the better protect international undersea cables and more aligned with Europe's action plan on cable security, which was announced in February 2025. So to conclude, Taiwan's conceptualization of strategic autonomy has been based on a broad national security construct with defining sovereignty, freedom, and democracy and self-identity, as well as promoting Taiwan's agency at its core. Its approach is integrated and multifaceted that proactively build strength and resilience, as well as seeking diversification to secure its interest and secure Taiwan's indispensability in the world through more cooperation. So I think I'll stop here, and sorry for going over time.
No problem. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And you mentioned several times the word resilience, which is a word that we didn't really mention before, and I think it's also very important and an idea that we share also in Europe. I will turn to the room for questions, so feel free to give me a sign or to my colleagues with microphone in the room. But before turning to the room, I would like to just ask a couple of questions to our speakers, and to start with Ambassador Rao. You mentioned a very complex environment surrounding India, and as I mentioned, the challenges that we have facing a very rising and coercive China, but also troubling United States. How India is navigating this landscape? We see that over the past few months, there were some divergences between Delhi and Washington, D.C. Vis-a-vis the war that India had with Pakistan and the position of the United States in this conflict. We also see that India is having better relations with Beijing, at least not by relation. It's trying to ease its partnership, its cooperation with China. Can you explain us how do you navigate this landscape, especially drawing from what you said, India being a bridge between the North and the South? I will rephrase and make it shorter. What are the priority partners for India today?
Yeah, thank you. In fact, that's a very, very important question. And if I may be permitted, I'd like to reframe it in the context of what strategic autonomy will look like for India as we move forward, given the various factors that you mentioned in your question. So, as I said in my statement, we want to maximize our freedom of action, whatever relationship with whatever country we're dealing with, and of course, maximize our capability. So I think the challenges for India today, if I look at how we are going to deal with this very fractured geopolitical situation, is one very real challenge is how we build strong defense and technological capacity at home. And that is going to take some time, and we need breathing space for that. The other thing is to conduct our trade without strategic vulnerability. And there is a lot of vulnerability inherent in our trading relationship with China today, because there is a huge trade deficit. And in a number of key areas, dependencies have been built up. And how are we going to de-risk that and build strategic resilience, the term that you used? I think as far as the United States is concerned, yes, we have been subject to what I call whiplash diplomacy from the Trump administration in the last few months. But I believe that the basic metabolism in Delhi looks at continuing to maintain trusted ties with the United States, as we do with Europe and with Japan and other democracies. With China, while you mentioned there is some improvement, it's true that we have resumed dialogue and are trying to reduce tensions along the line of actual control and de-escalate and disengage. But that is a process that is going to take time. And the critical ingredient for the success of such measures is strategic trust, mutual trust, and mutual sensitivity. And I think after what happened 5 years ago in the highlands of eastern Ladakh, up in the north of India, where we lost 20 soldiers in military confrontation with China, the rebuilding of our relationship is taking time. But for the moment, I think, yes, we can take some consolation from the fact that we are resuming dialogue with China. And what I think India and Delhi wants is a stable, managed competition with China. And of course, I didn't mention Pakistan in my remarks, but I think where Pakistan is concerned, as we look to the future, I think what India should be doing is to decenter Pakistan from its foreign policy definitions and its conceptualization, so that it does not drain India's strategic attention.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at the room. In the meantime, I have a question for both Kim Hyun-Wook and Chikako Ueki about the South Korea-Japan partnership that was pushed under the Biden administration and the former administration, both in Tokyo and Seoul. So we have two new leaders in Seoul with President Lee Jae-myung, in Tokyo with Prime Minister Takaishi. How do you think that this bilateral or trilateral partnership is part of a certain strategic autonomy, and how do you see the evolution of this partnership? Let's start with you, Chikako.
Okay. So I think that the realization of the importance of good and strategically, economically, politically partnership with South Korea is a fact, and I think the realization is more stronger now, given what is happening in the world with the relations with the United States and China. I think that is a fact. And actually, Japan has been feeling that way for quite some time. But I think we can see the new Prime Minister of Japan is more to the right of the ruling party. She is quite conservative. And I think the president of South Korea is probably more to the liberal side. And I think it was great news that the two leaders were able to connect quite well. And also there was a very positive feelings among the two of them, because if it was the more conservative president and more liberal prime minister, it would be easier. But we had a fairly conservative, even a nationalist, perceivedly, prime minister working well with the more liberal Britain. I think one challenge might be the domestic politics. And so I think that the biggest thing that the constituencies and the people want is lowering of the living expenses, so high cost. So I think it's the same in many countries. So if the Japanese government is able to deliver in what is the most important thing that the people want, then I don't think she would be a prisoner of some of the negative nationalist sentiments. So I don't really see any problem there. So that would be one of the things that needs to, because if things don't go badly, if things doesn't go well, then it's often the case that those more nationalist xenophobic ideas could sweep in.
Okay, that's encouraging. Hyun-Wook, any comments?
Yes, I think Professor Ueki mentioned very well. There was ups and downs of Korea-Japan relations. Think of from the Obama government and Trump first term and Biden government. Whenever there were some distortions in the Japan-Korea relations, U.S. government intervened. During the Obama government, there was not very good relationship between Japan and Korea, and many of U.S. government officials and experts visited South Korea, and they were blaming South Korea. Hey, it's because of you, not Japanese fault, that the Japan-Korea relations got worse. So we got so much angry. And then at the Trump first term and Biden government, the United States government became very smart and low-key to intervene in the Japan-Korea relationship. So I think, maybe that kinds of efforts made the relationship to survive so far. But during the second term Trump government, I don't think there is much efforts by the United States to bolster and strengthen the trilateral U.S., Japan, Korea much. Maybe Trump doesn't really care about that kinds of unilateral anymore. But anyway, after the Japan-Korea relationship based upon historical issues have been remedied very abruptly by the previous government of South Korea, I think this is continuing. We expected current Lee Jae-myung government to be anti-Japanese again, but I think he's very smart to take a pragmatic approach in his foreign policies and knows that Japan-Korea relationship is strategically important. Maybe I think two reasons, I think. The first one is that I think the war in Ukraine happened and when Putin mentioned about the possible use of tactical nuclear weapons in Europe, NATO responsive measures were twofold. First one maybe NATO can respond with the same tech nukes or with massive, conventional weapon systems. But that kinds of situations gave some, warnings to Asian countries like Japan and Korea. Hey, what if North Korea or China uses nuclear weapons? What do we do? Maybe the U.S. forces in Asia is not that massive as NATO, weapon systems, and we don't have nuclear weapons in Indo-Pacific region. So I think this is some sort of common feeling that Japanese experts and South Korean experts have. Of course, Japan, very anti nuclear sentiment is still there. So it's not very easy to obtain nuclear weapons compared to South Korea. Of course, South Korea is not easy to obtain nuclear weapons. I don't think it would be possible, not even in the near future. But that kinds of concerns about the what do we do if the U.S. is gone? If the U.S. doesn't apply, provide the nuclear umbrella or extended deterrence to South Korea and Japan, what do we do? I think that kinds of common sense is still there. And I think on high-tech industries, there is some sort of important ways of cooperation. We are trying to find out. So, for example, semiconductor manufacturing equipment, Japan is very good. Tokyo Electron is very good about it, as well as some Netherlands ASML and U.S. Applied Materials. They're good, and we South Korean semiconductor manufacturers and Samsung and SK needs those equipments. So those kinds of cooperations we are trying to expand and find more ways to cooperate between Japan and Korea and strategic high-tech industries, I think.
Thank you very much. So we'll start here. So we'll take 3 questions from the room. Please introduce yourself. You had a question, right? Introduce yourself. Keep your question short and state who you are addressing your question.
Okay. Thank you very much for the very interesting panel. My name is Nick Houtekier. I'm a PhD candidate at the Royal Military Academy in Belgium, working on geoeconomics, and currently a visiting scholar at Sciences Po. My question is addressed to Professor Ueki. Since 2 years, the EU has an economic security strategy, but actually Japan is way ahead of us because you have a Minister for Economic Security. Now, what can the EU learn from Japan's institutional framework? Should we get a commissioner for economic security as well? Thank you.
Very clear. Thank you. Can you pass on the mic to the gentleman in front of you? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Denis Verret, I'm Vice President of Euro-Defense France. And my question is, in the context, I would say, Putin and Trump, the reinforcement of the collective defense capacity of Europe is of essence for us. How much it is important for you, for your own strategic interest?
And third question over there.
Mr. McKinsey, consultant to Mrs. Hsiao. TSMC is contemplating building 3 new plants in Arizona. Do you consider that this may bring a risk to Taiwan as a matter of an incentive for Washington not to support Taiwan vis-à-vis China when these plants are completed?
Okay, perhaps we can take a final question from online. I've been told there were one.
Yes. Hi, I'm Céline Pajon, head of Japan and Indo-Pacific research at Ifri, and so I will relay a question online from our colleague Sylvia Malenbaum, who is leading the research on India. So Sylvia says the European Union and India are currently negotiating a new strategic agenda in parallel with the FTA, with the objective of strengthening their relationship into a comprehensive economic and geopolitical partnership. What are the expected outcomes of this process from India's point of view? So I guess this is for Ambassador Rao.
Thank you very much. So let's start with you, Chikako, on the Japan Ministry for Economic Security.
I
I think having a minister on economic security ties in and allows different parts of the government and different parts of the this problem to be sort of a consolidated in one. So I think that's a big plus because otherwise they are sort of in different parts. I would also say, though, this is extremely important. One of the questions is how much autonomy, right? How do you balance between thinking about the risks and having a profit for the company? Because having the profit for the company actually leads to innovation and health. So it has to go together with avoiding risks, avoiding vulnerability, but at the same time, how much would you spend in doing that? How much would you allow for redundancy? So it also, not just economic security, but it has to go hand in hand with economic development and other agencies. So I think, yes, I think it helps to have a minister specifically looking at this, but I would also say that it has to go hand in hand with other aspects of economy in more general.
Thank you. The second question was toward whom?
What was the question?
The question was about Trump, Putin, and
how much the strategic and collective defense of Europe is viewed by your own countries as of essential part of own strategic interests.
So how much do you consider Europe as important for your national
Should I maybe start?
defense strategy? Please.
I think one of the things that was really talked about was to make a clear, lesson from what happened in Ukraine is something, not a lesson that is positive for Mr. Putin, right? So so the collective action against Russia by Europe helps that because we're not letting something like that get away and be successful. Japan doesn't have a similar NATO type or even EU type. The former Prime Minister sort of talked about Japanese NATO, but that's not happening. So currently finding partners, multilateral things, and also by Europe standing up, that sort of frees up some of the US assets, which might be necessary for Indo-Pacific as well. So overall, I think it's a positive thing.
Any other comment from the panel?
The question was the security cooperation between Europe and Asia. Is it what your question is about?
How much, I repeat my question, you answered, how much the European defense collective reinforcement is viewed by your respective countries of very important.
Okay, I'm rephrasing for the online audience. How do you see the reinforcement of collective defense in Europe from your
how's it viewed by South Korea?
Yeah.
I think in South Korea, the similar thing is happening. Briefly talking about it, we just had yearly SCM meeting, security consultative meeting between two defense ministers of South Korea and the United States. One of the important topic was the military alliance modernization or transformation, which means that first part of it is to cut down the U.S. forces in Korea, especially ground forces, which is 20,000 soldiers, maybe cutting down it into 15,000 and making U.S. forces in Korea to be more based upon air forces, which is very edgeable and suitable to deal with Taiwan, continuous cases. Second one is, opcon transfer. We still have U.S. forces in Korea commander to hold the, wartime opcon of South Korean military, which I think the Trump government and South Korean government want it back to South Korea now. And then what happens afterwards? Some of the military structure, which is now combined together, combined forces commanded between U.S. versus Korea and South Korean military, would not have some, continuity because we have a combined forces command, and U.S. force Four-star general was the commander, and now we want to have South Korean four-star general to be commander of combined forces command, which is not easily accepted by United States. And last part of it is would South Korea and U.S. agree upon the strategic flexibility of U.S. forces in Korea, so they would fly into other areas of Indo-Pacific region rather than dealing with North Korea threat, which means that the security vacuum of the Korean Peninsula would happen. So all these kind of things are something that we are doing. But at the same time, because of all these intentions of the U.S.'s defense strategies towards South Korea, we also have moves to build up our defense budget into 5%, 3.5 for defense and 1.5 for other indirect investment.
Okay, I will turn over to Ambassador Rao on the EU-India relations, the FTA and the European strategic agenda, if you have any comments on this question.
Yes. Well, I think the perspective from India is that we have witnessed Europe's quiet arrival as a strategic actor. And what has happened after that is we see in India the emergence of Europe as a serious strategic partner for India. I think you have to look at how Russia's invasion of Ukraine has changed Europe. Europe is rearming, and this transformation has not made Europe a military superpower, because you will remain dependent on the US for NATO's deterrence architecture. But what we see is that Europe has acquired a new strategic sensibility, and that is something that India can work with. The other factor is Europe's changing attitude towards China, which has brought Europe closer to India, because we see a broad recognition across Europe's capitals that deep economic interdependence with Beijing carries strategic risks. And therefore, your language has shifted from engagement to de-risking, which many spoke of this morning. And while this is something that is compatible, I believe, with India's approach, because we want to prevent strategic vulnerability, but we don't want to close the doors on economic ties with China altogether. The other factor is the return of President Trump, Trump 2.0, and that has added a further layer, because Europe no longer assumes the reliability of US leadership. It's not that you're turning away from the transatlantic alliance, but you're preparing for a world in which you need more partners. And I think India fits naturally into that calculus. And now, therefore, as I see it, while the Indo-Pacific is one anchor of India's foreign policy, India is also looking at Europe becoming another anchor. So it's a kind of a new pillar of strategic cooperation, and on which we can build a future-oriented partnership. So to be precise, the clear areas in which we can build India and Europe a future-oriented partnership is defense and industrial cooperation, trade and manufacturing resilience, technology and standards, and connectivity. I don't want to go over my prescribed time, but what I want to say is that if you look at the glide path for Indian diplomacy today, a reliable partnership with Europe is very central to our journey.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. In a nutshell, Anne, could you answer the question on TSMC and how is it important for Taiwan national security?
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. Just a quick word that I think the collective defense is important for Taiwan, and you should continue pursuing it. On TSMC, I think that definitely it's a risk to be watchful, because Trump is, sort of trying to reassure to United States, to build a new ecosystem in the United States. But like Morris Zhang, the founder of TSMC, said, it's very difficult to replicate the ecosystem. It's about ecosystem, and it talks about talents, it talks about skills, and also resources, which I'm not sure the location that they choose will be stably, will be a stable environment for all the resources that they need. There is also at this stage, as I understand, packaging, testing will still be outside of United States. So it is TSMC, the Taiwan government respects TSMC sort of own business decisions, but in close consultation with the government. But at the same time, as I have said in my presentation, President Lai has recognized that Taiwan cannot be over-reliant on semiconductor alone. So we are moving also to develop other areas. So if you look into the AI applications, Taiwan is very strong in that, is building its capacity on that. And also that on space technology, we're not the best, but and also more agile industrial sort of capabilities on our small and medium companies around the world. So I think these are the direction that we can be thinking.
Thank you so very much to all of you. That was a fascinating discussion. Thank you very much, Ambassador Rao, for joining us from India. It was very, very helpful to have you. Thank you, Kim Hyun-Wook. Thank you, Hsiao-An. Thank you very much, Chikako, Ueki. And let's close our session here. We will reconvene at 1:30 p.m. Paris time for the 2 afternoon sessions. Thank you very much for your presence and attention, and see you later.